Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Redefining Quality in the Digital Age, a Validation 4.0 panel discussion with Grantek and Pharma Experts. So here's the agenda for today. So we're at the welcome portion of the webinar now, and following this, we'll do brief introductions of myself and today's guest before I briefly set the stage for our panel discussion, where my guest and I will chat about Validation 4.0, and after the planned discussion, we'll open it up for questions before closing out the webinar. Okay, so let's get to it. First up, introductions. So I'll start. My name's Bryon. I'm a functional consultant within the consulting and digital services team at Grantek. I've been with the company for almost 25 years now, starting out as a fresh face engineer straight out of school. And my career has grown with the company and has been primarily focused on the life sciences industry, where I've implemented and managed countless automation and information projects. As a functional consultant, I help Grantek's customers in the pharma, biopharma, and med device industries navigate the world of Industry 4.0 and Pharma 4.0. I'm actively engaged with the International Society of Pharmaceutical Engineers, or the ISPE, specifically in Canada, and as well, I've been involved in the Pharma 4.0 community of practice for many years. Martin, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Martin. So my name is Martin Dupuis. I'm the founder and president of Petero Consulting, based out of Montreal. I've been working in the pharmaceutical industry or the consulting industry for the last 20 plus years. I specialize mostly on CSV projects. So I've been helping companies in the cosmetic, natural products, as well as pharma industry, implementing, defining, and structuring their validation activities, and going from data integrity to refining and defining the approach in order to move towards the Pharma 4.0 model. I've been working with Grantek on and off on different projects, and right now my team is working with Grantek, working on different SAT scenarios and testing scenarios, and we started discussing Bryon and I through that project of Pharma 4.0 and how great the shift has been, and we're looking forward for the next phase of the next projects implementing 4.0 strategies.
Thanks, Martin. Now I'm going to jump into the first poll question that we have. The question is, how much of your validation and qualification activities and effort is still paper-based? Maybe you're traditional or all validation is paper-based. Maybe you're piloting using a digital validation tool. Maybe you're mostly digital, but you still have some elements that still rely on paper. Maybe you've gone completely digital with your validation efforts. So go ahead and vote now, and I'll sit back and wait a couple of minutes for the votes to come in. Okay, very interesting. It looks like there's a split between folks who are either traditional and completely paper-based and mostly digital. So some still on paper, though. So yeah, it's very interesting that there's kind of a gap in there, and people are still, living in the world of paper. So thanks everybody for all your votes. Appreciate that. Let's continue on now. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the concept of Validation 4.0 and what it is, how it's different from previous approaches. So I'm just going to set the stage a little bit for the rest of the discussion further on. And before we dive into Validation 4.0, let's all be honest with each other about where we are today. You saw the poll earlier. For decades, pharmaceutical validation been built on paper-based processes that were designed, in previous decades, like the 1980s. Still manually executing test protocols, printing screenshots, writing observations and results by hand. Requiring wet ink signatures, physical documentation, routing, storage rooms full of binders that serve as the official records. This creates real bottlenecks. According to the 2024 State of Validation report, the industry now spends approximately $50 billion annually on compliance activities. And much of this burden comes from excessive approval cycles, redundant documentation, the sheer time required to manually manage validation life cycles. But here's what's changed. Audit readiness has now overtaken the compliance burden as the number one challenge facing validation professionals. And why? Because when the regulators show up, everybody's scrambling to pull together all this information scattered across filing cabinets, shared drives, disconnected digital systems. That brings us to the third major challenge. These are systems that are siloed and the data integrity concerns that comes, with that. So, traditionally, we've separated all of these activities, these commissioning, qualification, calibration, maintenance, operations. All this is in different departments in an organization, different tools, different methodologies. And the result is that we're performing redundant verifications, redundant activities, manually transferring data between systems, struggling to get a holistic view of the validated status of equipment and systems. And digital validation tools, they've helped, but many of them, they inherit the structure of the paper-based predecessors. They're essentially behaving like electronic filing cabinets, storing documents and such, but the data remains static. It requires extraction and manual analysis to trend on, to report on. And really the bottom line is this: we're spending billions maintaining a system designed for decades old manufacturing processes. We're trying to operate in this Pharma 4.0 world, and that disconnect is what Validation 4.0 aims to solve. So if traditional validation is a problem, what is the solution to this problem? Well, enter Pharma 4.0. So I want to be pretty clear about something from the start. This is not an IT project. Pharma 4.0 is more than that. It's, as the ISPE baseline guide emphasizes, it's a fundamental business transformation. It's a shift in a mindset about how we operate to deliver value for patients. And it requires ownership from every leader and employee, not just the IT department. Pharma 4.0 leverages a powerful suite of digital technologies that are already transforming other industries. Things like AI and machine learning. It gives us predictive capabilities, the ability to anticipate quality issues before they occur rather than just reacting to them. The Internet of Things connects our equipment and processes, generating continuous streams of real-time data from sensors throughout the facility. PAT enables us to measure and control quality in process rather than waiting for end-of-batch testing. You have big data analytics to help identify patterns and trends that were invisible in paper-based systems. And technologies like the cloud and blockchain can provide infrastructure for data integrity and supply chain traceability that regulators are increasingly going to expect. But here's what makes Pharma 4.0 different than just adding technology. It's about the operating model. So we're moving from like a siloed, localized control to true end-to-end integration across the entire value chain. We're shifting from a static upfront validation to a dynamic data-driven control strategy. And critically, we're embracing a holistic approach that considers people, processes, and technology together. The industry recognized we needed guidance for this transformation, and the ISPE, for one, is delivered. In December 2023, they published the baseline guide for Pharma 4.0, and this has 35 real-world case studies showing how companies are successfully implementing these principles. And the guide also provides a maturity assessment tool so you can evaluate where your organization stands, chart your path forward. More recently, the ISPEs released complementary guides on Validation 4.0 and holistic digital enablement. These provide the practical frameworks needed to move beyond traditional validation approaches to something more continuous, more data-driven, and frankly, more effective. And the market's responding to this. Pharma 4.0 is projected to grow from about $14 billion in 2024 to about over $40 billion by 2030, with growth rates of nearly 20% annually. So this isn't just hype. Like, companies are investing because they're seeing real returns in efficiency, quality, and compliance. And this digital transformation enables us to respond to shortages, reduce production interruptions, and ensure consistent clinical performance. It allows us to embrace personalized medicine, small batch production with the same rigor that's applied to large scale manufacturing. And that brings us to validation 4.0, which is where all these digital capabilities fundamentally change how we think about ensuring quality. Okay, so let's talk about what validation 4.0 actually means and why it's fundamentally different from what's been done before. So for decades, we followed what I'm going to call traditional validation, which is the approach most of us have learned. You design your process, you install your equipment, you run your protocols, your IQ, OQ, PQ, and at the end, you declare the system is validated. It's this is a project based. It's a point in time approach. We qualify the systems individually. You revalidate periodically. And honestly, you spend a lot of time chasing documentation, managing batch testing. This is a reactive approach. You usually find problems after they've already impacted the batch. So validation 4.0 represents a complete paradigm shift in how we think about validation. Instead of like a static point in time qualification, we move to more of a dynamic or continuous verification. And the ISPE Good Practice Guide on Validation 4.0 describes this as adopting a life cycle approach that connects process design, qualification, and ongoing verification seamlessly. So this aligns with what the FDA has been asking for since 2011 with their 3-stage process validation guidance, specifically a stage 3, which is the continued process verification. And the key difference here is the holistic control strategy. I can quote directly from the ISPE guide. The holistic control strategy means moving beyond traditional, static, upfront, and localized validation controls to a dynamic, data-driven, and continuous approach to managing risks and quality along the broader value chain. So think about what this means in practice. Instead of validating each piece of equipment in isolation, you're looking at the entire value chain from raw materials all the way through manufacturing and then to distribution. So instead of periodic batch testing, you have real-time data streams giving us continuous visibility into the process performance. Instead of reacting to deviations, you're using predictive analytics to anticipate and prevent them. And this approach is built on 3 foundational principles that you may already be familiar with. Quality by design, which you've had since ICHQ 8, quality risk management, which comes from ICHQ 9, and now the holistic control strategy, which brings these together in a Pharma 4.0 context. So the regulatory framework's already in place to support this. The FDA's 2011 process validation guidance, that introduced stage 3, which is all about the continuous process verification during commercial manufacturing. EU's GMP Annex 11 calls it ongoing process verification. Then you have ICHQ 10, which provides the pharmaceutical quality system framework that makes continuous verification possible. And what makes validation 4.0 achievable now when it wasn't, let's say, like 10 years ago, are these digital enablers that we discussed earlier, digital validation tools, for the platforms to manage this complexity, real-time analytics and AI to process the massive data streams you're generating, integrated data platforms to connect systems that used to be siloed, and risk-based approaches to help or focus our efforts where they matter the most. So the result is you move from reactive to a proactive quality management. You can detect drifts before they become deviations. You can demonstrate continuous control rather than just periodic compliance. And critically, you can support innovative manufacturing approaches like continuous processing, personalized medicine, approaches that traditional validation paradigm simply couldn't handle in the past. And this isn't just about being more efficient, although validation 4.0 certainly enables that. It's about being fundamentally better at ensuring product quality and patient safety in a digital world. And that brings us to the question of value. So we talked about what validation 4.0 is. So then let's talk a little bit about why it matters. So why should your organization invest in a transformation like this? So let me start with operational excellence, because really this is where the rubber hits the road. Industry data shows that companies that implement these approaches are seeing 20 to 50% reductions in cycle times. So think about what that means. So your products are getting to the patient faster. Capacity gets freed up for additional products, better responsiveness to market demands. So you're seeing 30 to 40% decreases in deviations. And why? Because instead of finding problems after the fact through batch testing, you're monitoring these processes in real time. You're detecting just before they become deviations. And at batch record review times, some companies have gone from 7 months down to as low as 5 days. So that's about a 50 to 70% improvement. And this is done by implementing all these digital validation tools and automated workflows. But it's not just about speed, it's about quality and compliance as well. Validation 4.0 fundamentally shifts from a reactive to proactive quality management. So you can demonstrate continuous control throughout the life cycle, not just at periodic intervals, and data integrity becomes built in by design rather than something that's verified after the fact. And with automated audit trails, you're always inspection ready. So the result is improved first pass yields, so more batches meeting spec the first time, and significantly reduced human error through intelligent automation. And here's where it gets really interesting from a business perspective, speed to market. So in today's pharmaceutical landscape, being the first to market can mean the difference between success and mediocrity. And validation 4.0 enables faster time to market because continuous verification means you don't have months-long validation campaigns holding up product launches. And more importantly, it enables flexible manufacturing and personalized medicine, approaches that, past paradigms just simply couldn't support. And digital twins can help simulate and optimize processes before you ever touch the real equipment. And critically, validation stops being a bottleneck and becomes an enabler of innovation. And this brings me to strategic value. And I'll quote again from the ISB Good Practice Guide. Validation 4.0 ensures that validation processes are not a bottleneck, but a strategic enabler of innovation, quality, and compliance. And that's a key insight here. So we're operating in an environment where drug shortages are a real concern, where supply chain disruptions can have patient impact, where we need to respond to pandemics and emerging therapies like cell and gene therapies. Validation 4.0 gives us the agility to respond to these challenges. Companies that embrace this approach are differentiating themselves through quality excellence, and regulators are taking notice. They're more confident in organizations that can demonstrate real-time, data-driven control rather than just producing validation documents. And the market agrees with this assessment. We talked about the market growth, and that's, doubling more than doubling in 5 years. And companies are investing because they're seeing returns in quality, in efficiency, in compliance, and in competitive positioning. So the question isn't whether to adopt validation 4.0, it's how quickly can we get there and what's our roadmap to making it happen. And this is exactly what we're going to explore in our panel discussion today. So, Martin, the first question here for our panel discussion is, where are the limits? So where has validation been limited in the past, and how has this potentially harmed productivity? So I'll start with you, Martin. What your thoughts around this question and what you've seen in the industry so far?
Yeah. So to me, for the longest time, validation has been seen as this heavy task that needs to be performed, and to a certain extent, like misunderstood by other parties, except for the validation team, because you're pretty much running the test cases or running your testing strategy, ensuring that the equipment, for example, is working as expected and is meeting the specifications. So meaning that the equipment itself is being isolated as a silo approach, and you're just making sure that it meets the specifications, and you're running the test cases and you're documenting everything, kind of like a one-shot deal. Whereas the validation 4.0 is to basically implementing a strategy where instead of like having periodic validation, like revalidation, like running your validation a second time and a third time after a certain period of time, depending on your equipment's criticality, you're actually monitoring key parameters, for example, and making sure that the values that you're obtaining on those parameters are meeting expectation, and also that they're not impacting the product, so they're not impacting the patient. So the difference between the approach that has been being followed for the longest time versus validation 4.0 is ensuring that you do have a continuous verification plan, that you're working with the SMEs for example, for the equipment and for the global process, ensuring that you're monitoring the key parameters so that you can maintain or like have a better control on your equipment and your process globally. And so you're minimizing by doing so, you're minimizing the amount of validation that you have to do as a whole, because you're being more reactive on variances, for example. And instead of having, I'm going to exaggerate the example, but instead of having just alarms, for example, you'll have alerts, and the SME for an equipment will know exactly how to react and how to adjust, for example, the equipment. So like if there's something that happens, for example, like if for tablets, if the weight is varying a little bit, and instead of waiting for a bigger variance for the operator to react, or for the engineer to react, for example, you'll react with a smaller range on a smaller variance, and maybe it's just some key tuning or some other parameters that need to be worked on in order to like respect the range that you're trying to get. So the key to success for validation 4.0 is to have a continuous verification plan developed, and ensuring that you're working with an SME that knows exactly the critical parameters to monitor and start collecting data. So like we've been limited before, because I think for the longest time we were not collecting data, and we were just working with the equipment itself, and putting triggers that were basically stopping the equipment versus like reacting on a certain variance. That's my super long answer.
Thanks. Yeah. No, I hear you, because on my side, and this comes from various groups within our customers, but I oftentimes work with both the engineering teams and the CSV and CQV teams, and sometimes even QA, and they're in the past it was like, well, I'm not getting the data. I don't know what my machine is doing. I don't know how it's performing. I can't, I don't know how it's changed in performing over time. So a lot of the more within the last like 5 years or so, a lot of projects we have is how to interconnect equipment to systems for, either producing real time dashboards, or producing, um, you know, data hubs where, teams can, have, multiple data streams coming in and coming together, and they could get a contextualized picture of their plant and what's happening, in real time, or close to real time. And they can see, historically, how has this maybe changed from batch to batch, or compare lines, this packaging line versus that packaging line, or fill finish here versus fill finish there, or whatever. So yeah, I'm seeing that exactly, that same challenge, from a, potentially a different perspective, but you know, it's all a holistic, uh, you know, manufacturing opportunity is, right? It's get a clearer picture of how systems are running, so then you can be more efficient, and you can, you can respond quicker. You can, catch problems before they become, or catch situations before they become problems, I guess would be,
Yeah.
another way to put that. Yeah.
If I can add one more thing, because I'd like to cover the on productivity, even though it's pretty obvious, like the more validation activities you do on an equipment or your production line or your packaging line, um, the more that line is actually not working for the company, in a sense that like it's not producing, it's not making products, or it's not making any profit. So the key to success is to avoid stopping that line to run the validation activities by being more in control, and by having a well-structured, continuous verification plan, defining exactly which parameters you'll be verifying and making sure that you're collecting that data and you're working with that data in order to maintain that line or that equipment running instead of being validated. So it's a it's a bigger task in terms of like data analysis and data structure, but it's just a matter of like working with the right people, such as Grantek, for example, to collect the right data and store that data for input in a great historian that you guys can do. Not trying to like sell you guys.
Yeah, and then I think too, when you mentioned that, yeah, stopping the line to revalidate or to do a project, and then the validation piece. So oftentimes there's that a challenge with productivity there as well, because I might do a software FAT or an SAT on some changes that I made, or a new element to the process, for example. And uh, if things aren't properly planned, then a lot of what I've done, the activities and the tests that I've run, that may or may not be directly impactful to product quality, may get repeated by the CSV or CQV team. So there's that would be, from a system integrator perspective, maybe another way to capture a challenge to productivity, is this
Yeah.
the duplicate testing, the fragmentation of documentation, and trying to make sure you're covering, you're there's no gaps,
Yeah.
obviously, but at the same time, not trying not to introduce overlaps as well in the activities.
I love what you just mentioned, Brian. Like, just because this whole conversation, Pharma 4.0, started between you and I, based on like a typical case where like we document factory acceptance testing, and we run them at Grantek, and then we transfer, let's say, like the system, the technology to the client side, and we run a SAT, and then the client will run his IOQ and his PQ. And the goal is to basically like streamline the testing strategy. And like, we're like, hey, like we've been doing this for so long, we've been implementing so many systems and like helping out like so many clients. Like, how can we be more efficient and more direct and more in control also? And how can we structure it so that the client feels in control? And like we started talking about like Pharma 4.0 because it's something that we've been working with, and it just made sense to like refocus the testing strategy and making sure that, and whatever anything that is important, anything that is critical should be tested. Granted, that being said, like the duplicates should be minimized, because like working with the right team and with the right structure and having like a proper testing strategy that starts from the implementation development team. Like once you confirm that approach, for example, like with a SaaS system, any SaaS system that you decide to use on site should be like the supply itself of that SaaS solution should be qualified, and as part of the qualification, you should make sure that it meets your quality criteria. Like any quality system that they have in place should be challenged, verified. All the procedures for like the software development and all the functionalities that the system provides should be verified, and like should be tested. Sorry, and like you should verify the testing strategy, and also like if it's documented, because then you can reuse that. So in the same vision, in the same line, anything that Grantek is documenting and properly testing as they do, like should be reused in order to decrease the workload in the end in the testing activities. So like Pharma 4.0 is also like being able to have like a new way to structure your validation to be more efficient and to work with the right people that do have system in place that are already challenging the system itself.
Great. We kind of touched on this with the last question, but how will the promise of continuous compliance help the pharma industry? Maybe Martin, you want to highlight some of our past bullet points there that we talked through, and maybe focus on a few key things that we've chatted. Keep the juice flowing. Right.
Like keep it simple. You talk about
Juice flowing, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how will it's like anything, right? Like if you have a continuous compliance plan, it's basically saying that, how can I be efficient? How can my process be maintained? And how can I meet the quality requirements um, that the system or the equipment has? It's just by defining exactly like what you need to be complied to, by working with the right SME and by working with the right team to define like the CPPs and the CTUAs that you'll be monitoring. And and like I know that there are some questions regarding regarding legacy system versus like new system and new data points that could be acquired. That being said, like there are different ways to acquire data and then different ways to work with those data, but it's all about analyzing the data that you have in order to improve the process and making sure that you're in control at all time. So what will help is that if I know, working with the SME, I'll know what the different data patterns are, and I'll know how to react if, like, for example, like a temperature is going sideways, or if, for example, like my tablets are like getting smaller for some reason, like getting smaller. If it goes from like a 200 milligram to like a 195, well, maybe it's this parameter that should be worked with and anything. So it's being more proactive and like minimizing the amount of like reevaluation activities that needs to occur. Yeah. Oh, that's my simple answer. If you want to add something, Bryon.
Yeah, I think demonstrating continuous compliance also demonstrates a sense of, I think you touched on this, like a sense of like knowledge about how your process works and applying that to your activities to prove, that your product quality and patient safety is top of mind. And I think like in injecting that context into these systems that you have that collect the data, like that's kind of, kind of touching on where we tend to get involved is introducing, like, within your data structures, an hierarchy or an ontology based on standards like ISA 95 and ISA 88, right? Where I mean, I can come in and I can introduce what I've seen across multiple industries or what I've seen other people do in life sciences. But ultimately, I like people like such as yourself, Martin, who like live and breathe compliance and CSV and CQV, and I rely on your expertise to assist with that contextualization of the data, and also with the customer and their teams, their manufacturing teams, their tech ops teams, their maintenance teams, and so on, and the engineering teams to apply their expertise. So you said like having the right SMEs, right? And I think that's crucial, and getting their knowledge into the data structures and the context of the data is key, and that goes beyond compliance and into actual production efficiency and into like allowing tools like AI and machine learning and whatnot to have a clean and well established set of data that is aligned with the business and with how products are made at your company.
Yeah.
All right. Next question here. How will validation 4.0 help other parts of the organization beyond manufacturing? Ooh, I can start on this one. I mean, I think I sort of touched on that with discussing about the different other groups at a manufacturing organization that can definitely get involved with ensuring good data and clean and contextualized data. But I also think one of the groups that we haven't brought into the picture yet, and it's one that I work with quite a bit, is the IT group. Because they're usually the key enablers, alongside automation and engineering, to introducing these digital systems. And so I think having folks such as yourself with the compliance background, and folks such as Grantek with more of the automation background, working hand in hand with the IT teams, um, it helps them. It can help. We can help them um, deploy these systems in a efficient and compliant way to to implement these scalable data architectures, I guess is what I'd call it. And then kind of that has like a flywheel effect, because then you want to implement these other systems that also attach to your overall centralized enterprise wide data paradigm, and that introducing other teams like supply chain, um with integrated serialization systems, for example, for safety outside of the four walls of your business with respect to your product, um and maintenance, and having maintenance interconnected with the your enterprise asset management systems and CMMS systems and whatnot, and having up-to-date data on calibrations and equipment that you're maybe predicting is going to you know predicting with your analytics this system or this valve or this motor is at risk. um but that's my perspective. Let's hear from you, Martin, what your thoughts are around this.
Yeah, that's great. But if I can extend in terms of like being more in control for like, because you went all the way to a valve, for example, but
Yeah,
like,
yes.
but that was a good example. Like engineering wise, it's great because like you're more in control because you do work with the SME and you work on the CPPs and or with the CPPs and CQA, so and you define how to react on different situations in order to maintain that validation state, and that is all defined in your continuous verification plan. So if everyone is comfortable with your plan in place for that system or for that line, what it does is that at quality, for example, they always need to review the batch record, and they need to verify that everything's there, that everything makes sense, that data makes sense, and that for critical parameters, for example, if they've been, let's say, like that they respected the ranges, and that nothing is like out of bound. So like the 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 more your system, the more your continuous verification plan is well structured and everyone is comfortable with it, real-time release for quality assurance, for example, will decrease for sure. Supply chain, for example, well, they'll be able to have a clearer vision in terms of like release time and how to manage all the future batches and batch holes and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Finance, for example, like it will definitely like reduce working capital and eventually like lower deviation costs, and like you'll have like the cash flow will be more like there'll be less guesses. Guesses maybe is a strong word, but you'll be less dependent on like validation activities versus like having an overview and a dashboard and a vision of like what's happening. And same thing for like executive leadership. Like you'll have like your risk visibility across operations will be like super like well known and more you'll feel more in control, that's for sure. So everyone will benefit of like having a validation 4.0 structure just by having a proper continuous verification plan and the right SMEs at the right place.
Yeah, those are great points around the business side of manufacturing, right? The forecasting of when is my product going to hit the market?
Yeah.
Probably also, yeah, like demand forecasting as well, and uh, all that sorts of all those different elements on the business side that these engineering tools or these digital technologies are enabling better picture of, and uh, able to help decision making across the entire organization.
Yeah, totally.
All right, let's get to this is our fourth question here. Um, what is the best way to implement validation 4.0, and how will it help the manufacturing process? So maybe I'll lead with you, Martin, and your thoughts around that, and then I can come in with mine as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like anything, start small. It's it's a process, it's a journey, you know. But all jokes aside, like it's just like because I mentioned a bunch of times already, but it's all about your continuous verification plan and also who you're working with. For example, like for SaaS systems and for equipment, equipment providers and system providers, like anything, it's just start small. And also like this the 4.0 is all about the data, right? So how you're working with data. And some companies will be like, oh my God, like I don't have an historian now, or not, I don't have like the budget, for example, to install like all like complicated or expensive equipment and like collect those data. But some data can be collected, like no matter what, like there's always data can be like collected and to a certain extent like written down. And but it's all about to hit the biggest pain points in your process. So by identifying, for example, like the most deviation generator systems, and then map the data of that system or equipment, and select it as a pilot equipment, and just to make sure that everything's in terms of validation 4.0. Because in the beginning, it was if like when I first heard about it, I'm like, oh my God, like does it mean that all deliverables are gone and it's like a new way of doing things? Like not like you still need to run the like you run the validation documents and making sure that you're meeting those requirements. It's all about like, yes, you validated once, and you make sure that in your validation process, when you're documenting your specification, your user specification, you'll introduce, for example, the concept of like how like what will be captured as data and what will be tracked and how it will be tracked. And it's starting small to work with a system and defining the specification, for example, for data capture and how you'll be able to work with your continuous verification plan. So start small with a small system or equipment and define your strategy, or work with an external consulting firm. And like we can help you like support and define like how exactly like you should be working with SaaS systems and like implementing the validation 4.0 on like a small equipment or a small system, and making sure that you're comfortable with the process and work with an SME that knows exactly the critical variables and data on that system or equipment. Start small. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. Definitely agree with the starting small and starting with strategy. I think is another way that I would. It's usually when I kind of lead with the questions I get asked with when I'm working with a new customer and a customer approaches me about something like a data. Usually it's about data. It's like I don't know what's going on, or um, I have systems that are, I have some data in here and some data over here, or I'm not getting the right data, or I have all this data and I don't know anything about it. I don't know what it means. Um, and so yeah, it's like, well, let's look at, because we also look at it like budgets, right? Like
Mhm.
because starting small and demonstrating a quick win right away, it introduces a sense of confidence from the people that are working with you, right? That it's like, okay, we're going to pick a system that's, and I hate to use the term low hanging fruit, but we're going to pick the system that we feel is the most at risk. Um, and we're going to introduce this, a data contextualization and collection system, for this one system here. We're going to demonstrate that it is capable of producing the desired outcome, what we actually asked you know our integrator or our consultant to achieve. And then once we've proven that and we've demonstrated to the company that this is an achievable goal, we're going to expand into maybe a larger system. So it could be and those that starting small could be number one is just establishing connectivity across all of the devices and controllers and data production devices out on the plant floor. Taking that, finding a meaningful way to model and store the data and capture it, and finding a meaningful way to present it both in real time and over time as well, and from a historical context. So um, yeah, I agree. Starting small and kind of picking a system where you're going to demonstrate value right away, or as quick as you possibly can, to then build confidence and continue the momentum and deliver it
But
forward.
making sure that you're defining it in a document, for example, like a validation plan or a computer software validation master plan, just like, hey, here's what we want, what we want to do, because like it needs to be defined, it needs to be structured, and then you need to start small with that structure.
Yeah. Yeah, like a roadmap or a strategy.
Yeah.
In the non CSV terminology of the, I would refer to that. Yeah, it was like creating a implementation strategy or a plan, and then developing a roadmap to how you can get to your end goal from where you currently are. Um,
I agree.
yep. Okay, so that was the end of our questions of the formal part of the panel discussion. So throughout, Martin and I, we've talked about why validation 4.0 is necessary, how the concept of continuous compliance works and how to implement it in safely and efficiently. And really, I think, Martin hit it home when he said validation strategy, is key, and in alignment with the technical execution as well, and the SMEs is required as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think from Grantek's perspective, when we talk about like quality by design, I mean, we're not talking about the development and the execution of a project. We're talking about how we're solving your goals or achieving your goals with intent, and how we translate that into a sense of operational control over time of your manufacturing process. So we implement this you know at the system and automation level, but and we build in all of these concepts. We're not like just adding them or bolting them on, um, but so that's where we try to achieve your validation 4.0 goals throughout the where we specialize, and that's at the technological side of it. And we would rely on folks like Pareto to focus on the other side of the business there, the control, the compliance, and all those elements. So I'll let Martin continue from here on these final thoughts.
I'd like to correct the slide. It's Patero.
Oh.
So my validation skills are on.
I thought I was saying it wrong at the beginning.
No, but like you were saying it right. And I think like the last time you like actually read the name on the slide,
Yes.
so I was kind of like, oh, that's not what I was saying. No, but I agree with you. Like basically, the final thoughts, like don't be scared or worried of the validation 4.0. It's a strategy, it's a shift, but it's not that complicated. It just needs time. You need to take the right time to define a proper strategy, but it doesn't have to be super complicated. Making sure that you work with the right people. For example, like there are so many SaaS systems out there that's like ERP, for example. Like I've worked with natural product companies or like small pharma, to a certain extent, that like I've been working with SaaS systems that, like, for example, like once I'm called in to validate the system, I'm like, okay, well, let me talk to your SaaS provider, and I'll send a questionnaire, like a list of questions, like to like verify their quality system and how they work with the system and how they've been documenting everything. And two times out of three, I'll get a call from CEO of that company and be like, what are you asking for? This is way too complicated. We don't do A, B, C, and D. I'm like, well, that's the whole point of working with we're working with like, it's the pharma industry, for example. Like, you need to have a structure in place. You need to like challenge your system and document the testing strategy that you've been following, basically. So making sure that like you take the time to define exactly like how you want to do validation 4.0 and work with the right players that understand that it takes monitoring and it takes a plan in place in order to be compliant and to save time in the long run for validation activities that will be minimized through that monitoring. If I can finish with continuous verification plan. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm done.
All right. So we still have about 8 or 9 minutes left to answer some Q&A from the field. And if any of we had a couple of questions that just came up through the chat. So the first one is what are some best practices for documenting use cases, IT versus OT in pharma, new use cases in pharma? So I'm going to the way I understand, the way that I believe this question is asking is, how do you document your use cases when you're probably trying to make a justification to your management? And I think one of the key elements is to look across at some of the successes in industry at other, what other organizations or manufacturers have done. And I mentioned earlier the ISPE baseline guide of Pharma 4.0. There's, I think, around 35 different documented use cases of success of implementing Pharma 4.0 type of technologies and the benefits that arise in introducing these types of technology. So, and what they document is effectively the problem that was solved, what was implemented to achieve the solution, what the results were, and ultimately there's a business goal that is aligned with that. And so if you want a good, kind of like starting point for looking at justification and use cases and whatnot of like what you would use these technologies for, or how you would implement validation 4.0, I would look at the ISPE guides as a good starting point, I think. Martin, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good idea, but I think it's also important to identify, because like nowadays, not nowadays, but the more like we see more and more systems like talking to each other and sharing information,
Mm-hmm.
and also like for example, like you'll have ERP system that are exchanging data with lab, and then the lab system itself is using that data to perform some testing, and then there's data being shared from the LIMS, for example, or from another type of lab system that will be used in the release or like the release of the batch from the quality people. So it's important to take the time to draw the data flow. And not that I want to again name the continuous variation plan, but like it's important to draw the data flow and identifying the different data flows that will be coming out of different systems and like how they interact, and making sure that functionalities covered by an IT system are properly defined, and also what needs to be monitored, like working with an SME, and same thing from an OT perspective. I would actually like take the time to really like work with the SMEs for both types of system, and then working your way back up, I think, going from the architecture level all the way down to the process level.
Okay. Thanks, Martin.
Pleasure.
And I think this question is probably more for you, Martin, is like, how would you manage validating a DCS that controls multiple different formulation lines?
Actually, it's I kind of like gave the answer in the in the but what I just mentioned. But if it's a DCS that in managing different system, like it's going back to the drawing board and making sure that like the architecture level is properly defined and like what's being shared among the different lines is identified. So it's all about like having a clear vision on like what will be part of a certain validation task or validation segment versus the others. So like I would work with the SME again to identify like what's being shared in terms of information and like going back all the way back to the infrastructure and making my way down to the line type of thing. If it's a question related to like how can I save time and how can I potentially like use certain testing activities that have been done on one line versus like another one, it's all about it's all about making sure that those lines are like what is identical and also like in terms of data like what makes sense and what has been monitored like from one line to another. So I would just like go back to the upper level architecture and all the way down with the right SMEs. That's what I would do.
Okay. Excellent. We've got a couple more minutes left. I think we have time for one last question, which we got through the chat here. Does a less static validation approach relying on a continuous verification plan allow for easier continuous improvement on already qualified equipment? We found general hesitation to change or improve already qualified equipment due to the revalidation requirements. This sounds like a question for you, Martin.
I think the short answer is yes. Less statistic validation approach relying on, because to me, like, because I've been saying like continuous verification plan, but continuous verification plan allows you to have a better control and a more, like you're more pragmatic, you're more efficient, and you react on data changes versus versus a static validation. Or I read like statistic. A static validation is basically, to a certain extent, it's if you're following the old validation approach, is that you're validating your system after a certain period of time for X, Y, and Z reasons. Versus like if you're monitoring, if you have a continuous verification, you'll make sure that you're still in a validated state, and you can actually prove that because you're monitoring the right parameters, for example. So it's not easy to change. It's also the reason why it's not easy is because like it is a big change, and you're kind of like, hey, should we revalidate that equipment? Like, why? Because maybe your CPPs are like the ranges on those CPPs are too wide, and you need like alerts versus alarms, and you need to be more in control, and like working with an SME defining like the equipment's behavior after certain variation, for example, like confirming that you're in control at all time. So the more the more you work with your SME, the more you feel that you're in control, and the more you can actually like document and improve it in your continuous verification plan.
Yeah, I would think that doing a continuous verification would actually lead to continuous improvement as a follow on, right? And so instead of it being separate projects, it's kind of all intertwined.
Right.
All right. So we're at time.
Can I just add one line,
Sure.
Ryan? Because I've been saying continuous verification plan. Validation 4.0 does not mean that you validate once and you're done for life. Like there are deviations out there, there are issues with lines, and there are activities, like validation activities that need to occur for those reasons. But the goal is to be more in control, working with the data, and like make the data work for you so that you minimize the amount of validation activities in terms of like stopping the line, verifying that line or testing that line or equipment. So it's about being more in control. So you'll still have to validate once, for example, for a new equipment or for like legacy equipment. If you validate at a certain point that you want to implement the validation 4.0 approach, you still need to like define exactly where you'd be implementing that new strategy, so that because you might not have the data to support the validation 4.0 approach yet.
Great.
Your SNE will ask you for data in order to define your continuous verification plan. I'm done.
All right. Well, thanks, Martin. And thank you to everyone else who had joined us for attending. All registered attendees will be sent a recording of the session, and any other questions can be emailed to us at info@grantek.com. And thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.